This week's reject is the third chapter of my young adult high fantasy novel, Everwell, the story of Jeff the Boy's lost year. It was rejected by Anderson Literary Management. Now, the real nice thing about those guys is when they sent me that rejection form letter, they let me know it was a form letter, which is nice. It's honest. It's cool. But I will say one complaint. At the bottom of the rejection letter, it said, "Best regards, Anderson Literary Management." And I skipped to the bottom when I first read it. I thought, oh, look, what's that at the bottom? Are there some regards there? Oh, what kind of regards? They're the best regards? They gave me the best regards? And then when I found out it was a form letter, I was like, oh, they're just schlucking their regards all around town. I thought maybe I'd get the best regards. Other people that got rejected would get some so-so regards. But, they're saying I'm getting the best regards, but it's not true. They're giving their regards around. Their regards are getting around, if you know what I mean. Anyways, that's just how I feel about it. I'm a reject, you're a reject. I'm a reject, oh, oh, oh. I'm a reject, you're a reject. I'm a reject, oh, oh, oh. It was 1981. Jeff the Boy was running. The rope to his silver, shiny sled closed tight inside his mitted fingers of his right hand. His friends were gone and now sat in their home sipping hot chocolate while watching television. Jeff the Boy remained, alone on the hill, committing to the trudging up of the hill to experience the freedom of sliding down it. He thought he heard his name. This happened to Jeff twice before, but he never told anyone. His class watched a film on schizophrenia, and he didn't want his classmates thinking he suffered from a condition they couldn't even pronounce. He convinced himself that it was the sound of his snow pants rustling together. He stopped for a moment and listened close. He heard a light breeze, his breath, and the dead silence of winter. He waited for another 30 seconds. A semi-truck switched gears kilometers away from him. He stood still for 10 more seconds. Nothing. He continued in a bow-legged, slow walk, trying to reduce the whispery swish-swish of his snow pants. Again, he heard his name. Clearer this time. Nearer, maybe? He turned around and swung his fist. He was alone, but still embarrassed. There was nothing behind him but white snow in an open field, and nothing ahead of him but a rocky cliff face used as a sledding hill. He trembled. In cold or fear, he didn't know. He recognized something in the voice, something terrible. There was something hiding in the tone and pitch. He wanted to go home, now. Jeff sprinted heavy. He heard something again. This time, it was not the sound of his name. The ground shifted. Jeff, disoriented, fell to it. The sound of collapse overtook his senses. He couldn't think. Turning around, he no longer saw the scenery of peaceful winter. Across the field, the ground gave itself up, falling into an imploding pit. This caused a ripple effect of falling dirt, snow, and trees that careened in Jeff the Boy's direction. Jeff could care less what his snow pants were telling him now. He bolted. The north side of Suicide Hill was a craggy rock face. It went almost straight up in some spots. He thought that if he could reach the cliff, then maybe he wouldn't join the dirt that surrendered to the noise that was swelling to a deafening growl behind him. He was a car length from the rocks when the sound of the earth's descent was gaining on him. Jeff wanted to cover his ears, but was too afraid. He jumped, throwing his body toward the rocks. The snow and dirt gave way beneath him an instant after he'd used its solidness for a needed final boost. He caught himself on the rock wall, but his mittens made for a loose grip. Jeff struggled out of his mittens for a better hold. His sled fell from his hands. Out of instinct, he moved his eyes to see where it fell. A surge of adrenaline vibrated through his whole body. He could not see the bottom of the deep. A pitiless cackle burst from the bowels of the deep. A picture formed in Jeff's mind of a haggard, hateful, decrepit old lady. Her image invaded his imagination. It pushed through his thoughts until her face was the only thing he could imagine. Her wrinkled throat bobbled with each chortle like wrinkled wet paper. Each chuckle mocked joy. Jeff snapped his attention back to his present demand of summiting the rock face. His fingertips were paper white with strain. His arms shook with effort. The slow summit sapped his energy until the only strength left in his body was strength he did not know he possessed. He knew that one wrong move could send him into the pit. He tried pushing those thoughts out of his mind, but they returned.
I could die here.
The thought repeated. A blurry vision of his parents holding his hands formed in his mind. His right hand was the first to reach the plateau. He was able to balance and pull the rest of his body up. Safe, he rested on his stomach, breathing hard. His right cheek lay against the snow and reddened. Jeff took a moment to catch his breath, then ran home as fast as his feet could fly. He brushed through Parsons Woods, 2 fields, and the rest of town. He burst through his house, screaming out his words in a hoarse voice, his throat ragged from the run.
Earthquake!
It was only after he screamed that he was conscious that his parents would not share his fear. The houses in town were still standing. The people he had passed were unafraid, and his parents sat watching television lethargically.
The earthquake. Did you feel it?
Sorry, what's that, son?
Are you all right, honey?
He wasn't.
Yeah, I'm fine, but Suicide Hill isn't. Unless you feel like jumping into the center of the earth. There's an earthquake in Suicide Hill.
He stalled, waving his hands while his mind searched for the right words for his unbelievable truth.
It swallowed itself up.
For a moment, both of his parents stared at him. Jeff assumed they'd been struck dumb with shock. When his father's trademark dad humor peeked its head, he recognized otherwise.
With a name like that, we should have seen it coming. Huh, son? Huh, son?
A self-satisfied grin spread across his father's face.
Because it's called Suicide Hill.
Jeff's mom hit his dad.
Thomas George.
Jeff was glad he'd left out the voice he heard.
One crazy story at a time is the best way to break things to parents,
He thought.
Where you got this vivid imagination, I will never know.
His mom chimed in.
You should put this in one of your stories.
Jeff wasn't one to persuade. He went to his room. He thought about the event all night, replaying each detail in his mind. His experience was beyond his ability to interpret. He wasn't sure what was real and what wasn't. The next day, Jeff the boy's best friend Britt came over. There was just 3 days left until Britt the girl and Jeff the boy kissed the borrowed time of Christmas holidays goodbye and returned to school. Aware of this, Britt was determined to get the most she could out of those final 3 days. She even tried to give up sleep for the sake of vacation fun, but her parents did not agree with her plans. Jeff was sitting in the living room with his back against the couch reading a book about dragons.
Hey Jeff, let's go. It's only 70.3 hours until math class.
She said, looking at her watch.
Where are we going?
He asked, his attention still anchored to the pages.
To Suicide Hill, of course.
The dragons are here.
Jeff read.
What, Jeff?
Nothing. There's no more Suicide Hill, Britt. It collapsed into the earthquake yesterday.
Jeff said without looking up from his book.
Oh, of course. Silly me. How could I forget about the earthquake? Good one, Jeff. You had me going there.
Britt shot back.
No, serious. There was an earthquake.
No, there wasn't.
Jeff put his book down and sat up.
Britt, there was.
Jeff, this isn't even funny. There wasn't.
Their argument went on this for a little while. They dwelled on some insults, and it escalated into a tirade of, I know you are, but what am I, for a while. When it was evident that this line of reasoning wasn't going to win his argument, Jeff rose to his feet, slapped on his boots, and tightened his laces. He had a solution to the problem.
I'll show you.
Okay, show me.
She put on her parka, zipping it hard for good measure, sure he'd back down.
I will.
He held, yanking open the front door.
Then let's go.
She said, slipping on her dirty white boots.
I am.
On the way through town, past 2 fields and through Parsons Wood, Jeff told her the whole story. He told her about the earthquake, the narrow escape, and the cackling voice saying his name.
Does that sound weird?
Yes.
Are we still best friends?
I knew you were crazy before you became my favorite person in the world.
As they neared the top of Suicide Hill, Jeff's pace quickened with the certainty that he was soon going to point with a confident aha at the bottom of the hill that no longer existed. He stopped short when they reached the crest and saw the bottom of the hill. It was as it always was. An undisturbed stillness of unoccupied snow. Jeff's heart sank a little. Being a boy, not yet with a man's pride, he said,
Let's take a closer look, Britt.
They made their way to the bottom of the hill. Jeff offered his hand to steady his friend, but Britt insisted she could do it herself. He looked for clues, but knew neither what he was looking for nor how to find it. He thought at the very least there would be some dirt on top of the snow, but it looked as if their tracks were the first since the last snow.
I don't know, Britt.
Jeff heard something. It was low-sounding at first, scarcely distinguishable. His name. It was his name. The voice was back, and it carried with it a familiar smell. With his pulse in his throat, he delivered a one-word warning to Britt just above a whisper.
Run.
What did you say, Jeff?
The familiar low rumble like an engine turning overtook his senses. The ground shook in a familiar introductory shudder.
Run!
They were out of their minds with adrenaline and ran faster than they knew was possible. Britt was ahead of Jeff by about 10 feet. Jeff looked over his shoulder. It was happening again. Like a reverse wave, the ground was falling into itself. He screamed at Britt to keep her speed, to not turn around. She reached the rock face and climbed up. A shot of relief pierced Jeff's heart. They were going to make it. Like last time, Jeff's ears were weighing the approaching noise, and like last time, he knew it was going to be a narrow escape. Jeff prepared to make the lunge to the rock face ahead of him. Just one more step. Jeff put all his weight on his right foot to give him the propulsion he needed to reach the rocks. But there was no steady soil for him to jump from. The ground gave way beneath him. He was falling. He did not cry out. He did not scream. He closed his eyes and waited to die.